Welcome everybody that's watching this video today. I'm Wattie Watson. I'm the National Secretary of the Professional Firefighters Union. We represent all the career firefighters across the country. We also represent the call takers and dispatchers at the 111 call centre. We represent the people that go in the community and into businesses and into organisations to check their fire regulations, that they're compliant and their fire safety. They go into schools and educate children about fire safety. We have people that their role is to support volunteer brigades, and they offer training and all sorts of support to volunteer brigades, and we have professional trainers as well. In addition, we have health and safety representatives, and in particular people who are looking after the welfare of the firefighters and call takers and others that are experiencing trauma or other health and safety issues. And we have members throughout FEMS in a range of roles, and including some middle management roles. So what we wanted to do today was have a conversation about what's happening in our workplaces, and we sure is a snapshot of what's happening in the country today. So the COVID-19 situation and the vaccination debate has run rife in our workplaces, and I'm getting reports that some people are particularly harmed and distressed about the conversations that have been had or the way they've been had. And firefighter crews in particular must trust each other in order to put their lives on the line. So if you're going to walk into a fire or a hazardous event or cut someone out of a car, you have to be able to trust the person beside you, that not only are they trained and qualified to do it, but they will look after you, and they will not leave your side, and your lives are literally in their hands. So if we have situations and conversations in the workplace that are starting to deteriorate or undermining that friendship and that trust and that camaraderie, it's something we need to address. So we have with us today a wonderful special guest. It is a clinical psychologist, Gallagher. Hi, Catherine. Catherine is well attuned to the types of impacts that response and operational and organisational stress has on our membership. She is one of a series of psychologists that work very closely with some of our firefighters and other members, and really is a massive asset and assistance to us. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
We also have with us today Jaron Phillips. Jaron is the union's communications system, and he's with me to help me today to not only make sure this goes along as smoothly as it can, but also so that we can then load it onto all our networks, social networks, and so that you can watch it today. Catherine, would you like to give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. He mihi mahana kia koutou rau. So as introduced by Wattie, my name's Catherine Gallagher, and I've had the privilege and pleasure to be involved with what was the fire service and now FENS since the earthquakes. So a colleague of mine volunteered, worked for a small NGO in Christchurch. And when the earthquakes happened, obviously it was all hands to the deck in terms of trying to resource and support firefighters and their families, and that's how we got involved, how I got involved. And since that time have been able to support the welfare team here in Christchurch, in particular Jim Ryburn, and him and I have worked really closely alongside other firefighters down here around trying to meet the needs. And I think in Canterbury sometimes we're good at asking for forgiveness rather than permission, and maybe things like earthquakes and other things that have happened down here supports that attitude too, because we've had more than our fair share of challenges that we've had to cope with. So our interventions have looked like taking information out to fire stations and wellness checks, all those kinds of things, which I think are in recognition of the fact that you do a stressful job anyway, but throw into that when your community, and as you said, Wattie, the issues that we're dealing with at the moment aren't just unique to firefighters. These debates are happening in homes and workplaces around the city, the world, and I think similar to when Christchurch went through an earthquake, it was similar. You went to work and you were coming home and having to deal with those same kinds of stresses. So the role for psychologists and support to come in there and say, hey, how do we take some of that load off? and have some really important conversations around that. So really happy to be part of this, and on an ongoing basis, hey, because for some of you this might be new information, for some of you it might just plant a seed. And so if out of this conversation any of you want to seek support, then hopefully you're familiar with the welfare options that are available to you more directly. Otherwise, I'm sure Jim won't like me for this, so I'm sure get in contact, because there absolutely are ways to access support if some of these conversations trigger for you a need to get more support. I mean, just one other little caveat. I mean, obviously I'm a psychologist, so I know a little bit about emotions and feelings and things and behaviours. I'm not a medical expert, and obviously our conversation is going to touch on COVID, and I certainly have some clinically based observations of things that I'm seeing, obviously smattering with my own experience and things. So I just want to be really clear that if I'm going to try and stay away from any medical advice, and because that's not my scope. So yeah, just wanted to put that caveat out there.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that is really important, that this session is not about the debate or the information around COVID or vaccinations or the mandatory orders. It is about how we can look after ourselves and each other a bit better.
Yep.
So we have some extremely stressed and anxious people at the moment, and they are on the full spectrum as well of reasons why. We have people that are very, very worried about the onset of increasing community transmission of COVID in the community and the effect on the young, the old and the vulnerable in particular. We have members who are very concerned about vaccinations and the impact that has had, and that's a big debate for them in their personal lives and in their working lives. And we have people that are literally having to make decisions right now about whether they get vaccinated purely on an economic basis. So the firefighters and those that work in risk reduction, we're told on the 28th of October that the order covered them, because it wasn't particularly clear that it covered them until then. And so they've only had from then till on 15th of November to either get vaccinated or make some decisions. And then what happens to them in their employment from then going forward is not known at this point. And it could mean that some people are without income and jobs, but there's a process to go through before we get there. But time's running out and we're getting very close. So people are very, very stressed. And this has come on the back of some pretty tense discussions in the workplace and at home, and a lot of soul searching. So I thought to start with, maybe we could talk about the types of behaviours that people react. When we have, when we're under great stress, we might behave a little bit differently than what we normally would in the workplace. And if you're not under great stress and you're just having a conversation about vaccinations and it's not a big deal for you, and someone reacts very strongly, that is an issue. And in addition, we've had people that say they can no longer participate really in just general conversation on the workplace because they're too scared it's going to get to that subject, and they're too scared to put their view because they've got a very strong feeling that others in the room don't have that view. So maybe the first question is about really what are some of the things to look for if someone, I assume firstly, are they acting differently than the way they normally would about a particular topic of conversation?
Well, I mean, I think it's a really good question, and I wonder whether those of you who know me probably know I'll take a step back from there and maybe look to the question of why we might behave differently, because I think sometimes you're all going to know what you're noticing, right? And we'll talk some more about that. But the why can also be really, really interesting. I think that, often we think about the fact that we have an alarm system in our brains that deals with, I don't know, a fire alarm going off or a tiger chasing us. And that alarm system was designed to gear us up to fight, to run away or freeze. And hopefully the drama, passes us by. And I think that kind of makes sense when we might have a call out or we might be in a physically dangerous situation. The thing is, our alarm system goes off when we perceive threat. So not just actual physical threat, even though that's what it was designed for, but this part of our brain has the capacity to go, well, hey, wait a second, threat's not always so obvious. And what might be a threat to you might not be a threat to someone else. And I think this is where things get confusing, right? Is that actually you've got some people who would perceive having a vaccination at the same time as other people perceiving not having a vaccination as the biggest threat they can think of right now.
Yeah.
And I think we were designed to make quick judgments when we're under threat. Yeah, because, you know, if I'm mucking around thinking how dangerous is this tiger, how sharp are its teeth, how fast can I run, if I'm thinking about that before actually reacting, I'm probably already eaten, right? It's a bit late. Whereas, you know, in these kinds of situations, clearly there's more thinking that needs to be going on, but our brains weren't actually designed for those kinds of threats. So literally what happens, Wattie, is that when we're under stress, our brain kind of goes back to its modus operandi, which is actually react first and think later. So, you know, whatever we've perceived or whatever the meaning is for us that sees that as a threat, we are not doing a lot of, you know, analytical thinking necessarily in that moment. We are reacting, and our nervous system can kind of take over. And the other thing to think about with regard to the brain is that, you know, I mean, if we had a show of hands, whoever's watching this, and I sort of asked the question of who here is judgmental, most of us don't like to put our hands up. You know, we like to think that we're, you know, also understanding and also kind of compassionate and you know, give people a go. The reality is we were designed to be judgmental. You know, our brains deal with about 4 billion bits of data a second. And so, of course, it's had to fine tune and have patterns. You know, just like the first day, you know, firefighters might have gone out to a call out. I imagine everything was really consciously effortful. You had to think, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? What are they doing? You know, all of those things take a lot of conscious energy. Once you've done it a few hundred times, there's a lot of stuff that just becomes automatic. Yeah. And so that our brain likes to make things as automatic as possible. And so literally it was designed to judge. It was designed to have stereotypes. It was designed to come to judgments quickly, because then it wants to get on with the other stuff, you know, the new information that's coming. The reason I'm saying that is that, so our brains have this capacity to judge, chuck us under a high stress environment, and guess what we do? We judge quicker because, again, we're under threat. So our brain's going, no, wait a second, we haven't got time to slow down and think about this stuff. Are you dangerous to me or are you safe? And so our brains are making those judgments really, really quickly. And so here might be a colleague who I've known for, you know, 20 years, but suddenly, because I'm in this heightened state, I'm stressed, there's so much stuff going on, my brain is saying, hey, can you simplify it a bit, please? Can you tell me whether that person's safe or not safe? Or is this conversation safe or not safe? And if that's the case, it's really hard then to have a measured, calm conversation because we are just in defense mode. And we were kind of programmed to be like that, if that makes sense.
And that's a really interesting observation, particularly for first responders, firefighters, because they're very good at, they are the world's best, in my view, risk assessors very quickly. They very quickly, within minutes and seconds, assess a serious situation and make some very good decisions about that and problem solve. So they think that would be quite shocking for them, I think, that in these situations, they don't naturally behave like that because it's not something they've been trained and proficient and regularly drilling and do. Yeah.
And I think that the meaning of this is so different for so many people. Yeah. And I think that's what makes it complicated too, because, you know, absolutely, the public health message is go and get vaccinated for yourself and for, you know, the people that you love. And I, you know, fully back that, you know, as a public health message that is going to try and reduce the amount of COVID deaths and reduce, you know, stretch on hospitals. And so that talks to me, you know, at lots of levels. But actually, that same message isn't going to talk to other people.
Yeah.
They've got a different frame of reference. They've got a different set of priorities. Now, that does not mean that they're suddenly stupid or that they don't care about many of the other things that you might care about. But I think, remember what I said about our brain's tendency to judge and judge quickly, is that we get into this polarized state of going, you're either with me or against me. And again, when we're highly, highly stressed, if you're against me, then actually we get more polarized, right? And I think that we then, and this is one of the challenges, and again, you know, I'm trying to keep within my frame here, is that the public health message has been really, you know, trying to get it out there in as many ways as it possibly can about, you know, being well for yourself and being well for other people. The thing, my understanding of the public health message is they never actually said that people who weren't vaccinated have suddenly become dangerous. There is absolutely an increased risk of passing on, you know, the COVID you know, disease or difficulty, but you could be walking down past someone on the street and they could have COVID and you wouldn't know. So I think that this message has become that not only has someone who is unvaccinated, I mean, bottom line is someone who doesn't get vaccinated is taking a risk with their own health. Yeah. But if you are choosing to be vaccinated and you are, you know, having social distancing and you are wearing your mask and all those other kinds of things, you are doing the best thing you can possibly do to keep yourself safe. And in a way, someone's decision to to not vaccinate is kind of on them. But I think the public health message has got mixed up with our natural desire to have goodies and baddies, right, or things that we can control. And so again, that public health message seems to have got mixed up with goodies and baddies. Now, again, I'm probably going to be offending some people, offending, you know, not offending other people. This is how this conversation goes, right? And I'm trying to be as neutral about this as possible. But people are going to hear what I say as a support to their argument. Equally, they're going to hear what I say as a kind of a, you know, against their argument. And I think this is what our brain does, right? It searches out the pieces of data that fit with my position, because once I've got my position and I've locked down on it, I can feel safe and secure because I know what's going to happen next. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think for firefighters in particular in our membership and others, that these people care immensely about the community, and they you know, the quality and quantity of life on the line all the time. And so for other people, including their colleagues, can't understand how they've got to a point of saying it's in my world, it's better that I'm not vaccinated. Yes. And when I, you know, the emotion I get from the firefighters that aren't vaccinated and what they want to do for their families and their communities, etc., and the loss of their profession, the loss of that ability to work with the community is probably just as great as any fear of losing income. And you know, and as you say, there's other people go, well, why is this a big deal to you? You know, so it's.
And I think that's the thing. Like we've got this alarm system, which for most of us operates the same. Where we get screwed up is this part of our brain, because this part of our brain can think, right? It has experience. It has a capacity to form opinions. And I think this is what always confuses us, is that I kind of think, well, with the same lots of facts, we're all going to come to the same conclusion. Wouldn't that be great? Yeah. But that's not how the cookie crumbles, right? We literally have the same amount of information and we come to different conclusions. And I think the out of controlledness, I've made that word up, but how out of control we feel about this whole COVID situation has meant that people are trying to grab control where they can. And for some, it's, I'm not going to get vaccinated. For others, it's, I'm going to get vaccinated. And it's like we all do that to try, and when we feel out of control, when we feel like there are things that we don't understand or you know, unsettle us, we often try and grab onto something that makes sense to us. So again, that adds to that polarization. You know, we get further apart. And I think the challenge is the more pressure that then's put on someone, the further apart we get.
Yeah.
Because then it's almost as though if I move from my position, what does that mean about me?
That is a massive issue. And I think that's where we're at for many, many people in our workplaces. And now we have to recognise that we're in that spot, and what should we be doing to what can we do to try and remember or try and bring it back to actually, I have always trusted you. I value your friendship and as a colleague, and we've completely gone to polar opposites on this issue, and we've had probably some very damaging situations and conversations about it. So what sort of things can people do or think about in terms of one, do they want to repair that relationship? I think they're going to want to repair that relationship at some point, I would hope. And then how do they start bridging that gap, including I've got a position and I can't move from that position. So how can I possibly start to repair the relationship with you?
Look, it's a really good question. And I was just thinking, who's ever made a decision that someone else didn't agree with?
Everyone.
Everyone. Do you like dark beer or wine? Do you like, what did you study at school? Do you like rugby league or rugby? These are decisions that we're making all of the time. And you might have some real diehard rugby league players out there and some real diehard rugby players, and they don't understand each other when it comes to Saturday watching sport. But this decision, like everything else, is just a part of someone. Just because I like rugby league, that doesn't become who I am. It's a decision I'm making. It's a value I hold. And I think one of the things around how do you stay in relationship, because coming back to what you said before, Wattie, it's how do we stay in relationship when we've got different opinions? And it's reminding yourself that actually this is a person who's more complicated than just a decision they're making. Complicated and wonderful and messy and amazing and fuck, excuse my French, I'm allowed to swear, fuck that, whatever. This is, we're all that complicated, right? And so this is one aspect. And the current climate means that one aspect has been amplified. And I think so the challenge for us all is to go, well, how do I remember that this is, in this high stress situation, part of who you are? It's not all of who you are. And I think if you can try and go, look, I literally don't understand why you're doing what you're doing on both sides often, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe it needs to be, maybe I don't have to. Maybe some of those really heated conversations are about people going, I should understand. Well, next step even, not only should I understand, but I should then need to convince you to change your mind. And that's red rag to a bull light. I suspect that no conversation over smoko is going to actually change someone's mind at the moment, right? So, you firefighters are great at minimizing exposure, hey? You go in there and the leaders are going to say, hey, look, you guys don't need to see this because, we're going to deal with this. Or you're preparing and you're minimizing exposure. So part of me wonders about viewing this situation a little bit like, that you're going into a high-risk situation around the smoko room or around a conversation. And actually, what is the likelihood of me changing your mind right now? I'd say it's teeny, if not zero, if like negative 50, right? I just made those numbers up. But so in that moment, actually, do we have a conversation about this? Am I able just to think, actually, if I need to talk about these issues for myself, maybe there is some people that are useful for me to talk to about this, or maybe there's a context where I'm able to, get other information about this. But if I've got someone I'm getting into these argy-bargies with, the likelihood is when everyone's stressed, we are not going to change each other's mind. No. The key is, the challenge is though, sometimes if we are full of stress, getting into a good old Barney with someone can sometimes be a stress release. So if I've got all this pressure going on, then in fact, everyone else can go, hey guys, don't talk about it. But to some extent, for one or both of those people, this is actually one of the ways they're coping, which is to get bloody angry at this person, at you, Wattie. If I've got so many things out of my control, actually, I might target you a little bit because you're just pissing me off right now because you're saying something I don't agree with. And that's, in a way, it can kind of help me discharge some of that feeling of being out of control. And it's not going to help yours and my relationship, right? But I wonder whether, if you're noticing colleagues in that space, or you are in that space, first of all, making a decision way back here, I'm not going to talk about this today. Or if you're a leader in those positions, to say, hey guys, actually, this is not the place for that conversation. If you need to do it, let's do it under this context. Or if you want to talk about this, maybe we can, you can talk about it with this person. So actually taking quite strong leadership over how do you minimize exposure and kind of drop some of this drama around the stuff. Because literally, if you keep engaging in these conversations, hoping it's going to change their mind, I don't know, that was the definition of insanity, right? We keep doing the same thing and think we're going to get a different outcome. So I'm not implying anyone's insane here, but literally we can keep jumping into the same behavior and think we're going to have a different outcome. I would say in this high pressure situation, that's not likely to be the case. So I think minimizing exposure, being people showing leadership, the bystanders actually stepping in and going, hey, we need to actually step away from this now. I think the idea of again, maybe there are no-go or high-risk particular things we don't talk about, or we're a bit more cautious about talking about. So that's this kind of challenge. I think it's really important for people to have people to support them, and it might not be your person who has a different opinion. This is challenging, right? Because in a way, if I do have a strong opinion about being vaccinated or not, and I only ever talk to people who support my position, I kind of feel better. I'm not being exposed to different opinions. So I think I'm not saying never talk to somebody who has a different opinion to you, because that's how we grow and learn and develop. But I wonder whether there might be certain people you can talk to about this, who are more measured, who are not so black and white about it. There may well be some people who are useful to talk this stuff through with, who can be more in the middle. And that might be useful if you're needing to talk the stuff through, to talk through someone who, is at least being clear about the judgments they hold and is able then to be present for you to hear you talk through your logic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The other thing about this then is not just the specific conversation, is, as I said before, when we're stressed, no conversation goes well necessarily, but these ones even less so, right? And especially as pressure builds towards the 18th or whatever date you said. Yeah. It can be about how do we just, it's almost like this cup of tea, right? If I'm probably a little bit anxious anyway, or I've got a certain temperament, or I'm a bit of a grumpy old bugger anyway, so that's kind of my temperament. I've had some stresses at home or through my life experience. I've got some stuff going on, that have happened, or I've negotiated well or not negotiated well. Maybe my kids are stressed, or my wife's stressed, or everything else is going on. Chuck on top of that a call out or two that puts a bit of pressure on. And of course, at the moment, this whole issue with regard to vaccination, not vaccination. So I'm walking around or turning up into work with a full cup, right? And it doesn't take too much in terms of a wobble or a bang where I'm starting to spill. And if I happen to be walking into a coffee room, into the smoko room, and other people are walking around with full cups, you can see how spillage can get pretty messy pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So that's where some pretty strong leadership might need to be the case in terms of, hey, let's manage this. Let's make sure that we're kind of being a little bit more, I suppose, clear about what are safe conversations and safe rules around how we communicate with each other, be respectful. I think the other thing, though, is how do we lower our own cups? Because I can sit there and go, look, I'm fine. You lower your cup, so that you manage what I've got to say a little bit easier. Thank you very much. But I don't know about you guys. We can wait a very long time for someone else to behave better, and even though they should, of course, actually, it's quite a powerless position to be in when I'm waiting for someone else to behave better. The only thing we actually have control over is how do we empty our own cup? Does that mean actually I might need to take a couple of days off just to clear my head? Does that mean I actually need to talk to someone who I trust, who's not going to try and talk me out of my position? Because I don't know about you, if someone tries to talk me out of my position, guess what I do? I hold it stronger. Yeah. Maybe it's that I need to, actually take care of how much sleep I'm getting, how much I'm eating. Am I exercising? Am I doing those things? This comes back to your initial comment there, Wattie, about how do we take care of ourselves under stress? All of those things are about not suddenly, hey, we're walking on top of the world, but it's just about building in some reserve so that when we do run across a challenging situation, our cup can wobble and we're not spilling over. Does that make sense, or is there?
Absolutely. And I think also the cup for some people at the moment, particularly for our Auckland members, they've had a long time of being separated from family and friends and, being isolated in many, many ways. And then to have this compound so that they're not even being exposed to the range of firefighters or other colleagues in the workplace they would normally, we run a kind of bubble system to keep them safe. And so, if you've been in a really difficult workplace in terms of this debate for whatever your position is, and then you're isolated and you go home and there's a very limited people at home that are physically with you, sure, you could bring someone or do a Zoom or whatever, but it's not the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the interesting thing too is again, you know, in terms of the Auckland experience versus the Waikato, or the maybe the Waikato is up there a little bit as well, but Dunedin or Canterbury or Wellington, is that, you know, literally your lives have been curtailed, you know, have been impacted by lockdown for so much longer than we have down in Otatahi and Christchurch. And so I can kind of do life pretty much like normal, right? You know, I might have to flap on a mask, might have to get my thing going, you know, like, but pretty much life is as usual. And I think this is one of our challenges in New Zealand as well, is that we haven't had, thank goodness, a lot of death, you know, as a result of COVID. The flip side, though, is that we can potentially go, how big a deal is it? You know, whereas actually, and that might not change some people's minds, you know, some people can have some very clear reasoning behind their anti-vaccination beliefs. And again, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, right? It's your right to have a belief. I suppose it's just the challenge around the pros and cons of those beliefs and the impacts of those. It might be easier for me to focus on the negatives of the vaccination if in fact the positives of having the vaccination are a little less visible. If I'd had family members dying, or if I'd had other challenges going on, I might see the benefits of the vaccination more than I might. And again, I know I'm possibly getting into that conversation, but, you know, I think that we come into this situation with very different experiences, very different beliefs, faith beliefs, you know, beliefs around science, beliefs around family relationships. And, you know, I think the sense is that there's some that are more right than others. But if you're in that position where you've got a different opinion, my opinion's my opinion, and I'm kind of allowed it. And that's kind of free will, right? So this is a really, I mean, I'd hate to be the government right now, hey? You know, I'd hate to be fire service management. You know, this is really hard because actually we're playing with some really big issues here around public health and safety, but also people's autonomy. And I mean, whoa, that's a bit of a shit sandwich, right? In terms of having to try and work that stuff out and walk a line where most people feel respected.
Well, I think that's really useful. I think probably the last real area for us is on the 16th of November, the way the order is currently, there will be people missing off their cruise because they were either not vaccinated or they haven't declared their vaccination status yet, so have to be treated as unvaccinated. They may or may not be in the workplace or doing something else, but it will be a very changed environment, and people need to think about that, right? They're going to have a loss without perhaps any lead into the loss or any of the normal ceremonies or morning teas or whatever, right? To farewell someone or to see them move into another role. And in addition, the firefighters that are able to respond as firefighters or remain in the workplace in their role, in their chosen profession and what they love doing, they're going to have to do far more of it because they have to cover for what we've lost, right? So I think there's two groups then on the 16th. There's those that have absolutely possibly lost everything. We've got processes to go through, right? But ultimately are facing losing everything in terms of their passion, their career, their love for the community and their jobs and their income and all that comes with that, as well as those that have a changed world as well. And we've had this fraught period where the separation is not going to be a pleasant situation. It's not, we don't rejoice, we don't recognize the work or the service of everyone in the situation. So what can we possibly expect? Will that be a different level of stress, do you think, or different behaviors, or?
I mean, I think you're really honoring the complexity of this, and maybe we just have to sit with that, right? Is that there's no one feeling that's the right feeling to have in that situation, you know. I think that there'll be some who go, phew, you know, the arguments have stopped. There'll be some who, and again, not even some people will have different feelings, but one person might have 20 different feelings about this experience, and that's normal. And our emotions teach us stuff or tell us stuff. So yes, I might have some relief because actually it was getting far too stressful. Also, I might have really strong opinions. And so even for those who have had to leave the job, the the stopping of the arguments for a moment might actually have some kind of, so in the short term, there might actually be some different emotions that then become apparent when the dust settles. And so when the dust settles, you may well then have much more grief, or grief might show itself in different ways. Sadness, frustration, maybe some shame and some guilt about how people have behaved. Because we don't always behave at our best, do we? When we're feeling pressure and feeling under stress. I think that this is the bit to remember, right? Is if you are having these barneys with someone, take a moment to think now, if I don't end up working with this person, I was never going to change their mind anyway. So something that can help us, Wattie, is to come back to our own values. Okay. And some of this is probably half the problem in the first place at the moment, right? Some of those values are in clash with each other, but I suspect that most of us didn't wake up this morning with a vaccinated versus non-vaccinated value. You were a firefighter, right? Because you valued the community. You're a firefighter because you actually were a hard worker. You're a firefighter and you valued brotherhood or sister, like being in a team. And those values haven't disappeared overnight. So even if you're hating on someone at the moment and finding it really hard to be in their presence, try and get back in touch with some of those other values that mean that I can be sitting next to you at the coffee table and hate or disagree or be so angry about this position you're taking because I just don't get it. But maybe I take a deep breath and remember that you're a human being who's more than just one decision. That actually if next, in a couple of weeks' time we don't have to be working together, actually, how will I feel? I mean, not in a way, how will you feel is one thing to think about, but also how will I feel about the fact that actually we left it like that? And maybe we agree to disagree. Maybe we take this opportunity to go, hey, look, I don't know what you're going through right now. Hey, I'm having a real hard time understanding it. And maybe me trying to understand it is part of the problem. Maybe I just have to not understand it and remember that we've worked together for 10 years and, I was there at your kids' christening or, like actually those values that I'm orienting back to are about who I am as a person. So I might want you to get vaccinated or not get vaccinated, but in a way the focus on other people is probably kicking us off in the first place. We have to orient back to ourselves and go, well, who do I want to be as a person? Do I want to hate on people because of decisions they're making? Or do I want to make sure I'm as safe as possible, but actually be someone who can tolerate the idea that people have different opinions? Now, I'm not trying to say it's as simple as that, right? I'm sure some of these things have got really fractured, but really good relationships can tolerate rupture and repair. And repair might look different, like your relationship might never be the same with this person, or it might take some time to heal. But I suppose the biggest thing I'm often talking to people is how do you stay in relationship? How do you keep the door open? And this person you may or may not care about you're both going through a really tough time. Try and create some space for that. In terms of organizations or workplaces, I think even if you don't have a celebration, I think, is there someone in that workplace who can get alongside the person who might be leaving and just go, hey, actually, I'm really sorry it's come to this, and actually, even if the dust settles, how do we farewell you in a way? Because maybe I'm being completely naive here, and if I'm not a medical expert, I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm probably getting it completely wrong, but there will be a season to this, right? That season might last 5 years, 10 years, who knows how long that season's going to last, but our relationships are potentially bigger than that. And so I think it's how do we hold that bigger game, that bigger picture and our own values in mind, so that we can traverse these ruptures and these finishings. Is that answering your question, or am I?
Yeah, absolutely. And a good outcome for our members that are that won't be able to respond as of the 16th will be that they are in the workplace, albeit doing something different, or not in the exact workplace, but still they're doing something different, and they will still have a massive sense of loss that they're not on the trucks, right, or they're not responding or doing their normal job. And there's a very grave fear, I know, with some of them, that if they're in the workplace doing something else, the fraught behaviours and the fraught relationships with their former colleagues will follow them, right?
Well, and I almost guarantee, Wattie, they will. You know, I'd hope they wouldn't, you know, but the likelihood is that, and I mean, you guys have had contract negotiations to chuck in there as well, haven't you? So that's going to stir the pot up for some people. So, you know, when there's stuff going on and we're full up, then I'd like to say we will behave maturely or responsibly or whatever, not always, hey? So I think rather than hope that it's all going to pass or that we won't have, you know, these challenges, in a way, it's probably safer to go, how do I plan for reality? Because if I'm planning for what I hope it's going to be like, and reality was always going to be that there might be some tension or awkward conversations or someone else might stonewall me or whatever, then if I'm dealing with what I hoped it was going to be like and what reality is going to be like, then there's a really big gap there for feeling frustrated or helpless, hopeless, whatever. So part of this is about going, how do I actually bring my expectations in line with reality? And reality is the next 2 weeks are going to be pretty shit, right? And that the probably next wee while after that is going to be pretty difficult. There's going to be people who are going to hold on to stuff. There's going to be people who move on from it once decisions are made. So you probably know the people you're working with, right? You probably know the ones who are going to be challenging. And maybe you take some space from them, or maybe you take a big deep breath before you walk into the station and go, right, I'm probably going to get a bit of hassle, you know, there's a bit of fire, you know, there can be some bullying in fire stations, a bit of banter, a bit of whatever. And if we're walking around with an empty cup, I can cope with a bit of banter, right?
Yeah.
If my cup's full, not so much.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind if you're the one who's about to come out with a smart ass comment, because it might not be heard as well, given that everyone's stressed. But also if you're someone who is feeling filled up, how do I prepare myself to walk on station and go, I'm likely to probably get some crap. So actually I need to take a few deep breaths, or I need to make sure I kind of time it so that that particular person isn't there. Or actually I need to make sure that I go on with someone, you know, like I plan for the reality of I'm likely to get rather than cross my fingers and hope for a difference.
Yeah. And the person that's going to dish out the crap, maybe you could have a wee think about how it's going to be received. And even if they thought it was a bit of banter, it actually can be really devastatingly harmful to the person receiving it.
And let's not forget, I mean, you guys are the union, right? Is actually there are some codes of conduct, I suspect, about how you're supposed to behave with each other.
Yeah.
So actually, if some of this behaviour has not been safe or actually, you know, goes against those codes of conduct, then actually we all need to look at ourselves.
Yeah.
And go, yes, we're heightened, yes, we're walking around with our full cup, but bottom line is actually every human being deserves some respect. And I suspect that, you know, an employment court or whatever, those things, we don't get away with actually really bad behaviour towards other people. So of course, at the moment, there's a bit of slack being cut because we're all kind of in this difficult situation. But bottom line is we actually have some laws that tell us how we need to behave with colleagues. And so I know I'm probably sounding a bit firm there, but I think actually we can't forget, this is an excuse for bad behaviour. We kind of have to catch ourselves on a little bit too, hey?
Yeah. Look, I think this has been really useful conversation for me. I hope it's been a useful conversation for some of the people watching. And we can't finish without reinforcing really clearly to everybody, if you are struggling, you are not alone. You don't have to be alone. Reach out to the union, your union official, reach out to me, reach out to the welfare officers and FENS. Reach out, you know, we do have the systems to get you the help and the support you need, including clinical psychologists like Catherine. And if you're not one of our members or you're not within the FENS personnel, please ask for help. And if you don't know where to get it, you can even still come to us for that. We do not want people to be absolutely feeling isolated and know where to go and not know what to do next.
And keeping in mind too, and I'm sure this is true for you, that it's not just if you're struggling, that if your family members are struggling as well. So I certainly know, I'm sure it's the same around, you know, New Zealand, is that, you know, the offer of support is not just for the firefighter, it's for the family. So what part of your stress, part of what might be filling your cup up is actually that there are some people in my immediate circle who are struggling too.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much, Catherine, for your time. I know you're flat out, and we keep you busy. Our members keep you busy. And thank you so much for your time in that discussion. And I hope something in there is of some benefit to
Absolutely. And again, the only thing I would say is this is tough for all of us, hey? So we need to try and grab hold of our compassion. Yes. And sometimes actually staying in relationship is more important than being right. Try and remember that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Catherine.
A pleasure.
Good evening.